Podcast is Christian. This podcast is reformed. This podcast is post-millennial, optimistic, and reconstructionist. And this podcast is for fun. Welcome to Reconciled Radio Episode 5. We are glad that you joined us again here in the bunker, the secret bunker in Northeast Michigan. I'm Brian Riddle, along with my buddies Jesse. What's up, buddy?
What's up, man?
And Jacob.
Top of the morning to you.
Mocha Knox, the bearded dragon.
The bearded dragon?
Yeah, I don't know. I just made that up.
That's a new one.
That's not real. Listen, guys, this is going to be our most serious episode to date. And there's going to be zero fun had. No banter to speak of.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
And nobody does have no time for these moments.
That is a filthy lie.
Jesse, what do we have going on today?
Today is going to be a fun episode, not going against what you're talking about, that blasphemy you speak of. This is going to be our fun, awesome, just laid-back episode. We've actually, in the last few episodes, we had some pretty serious topics that we got into, especially the last one. We spent most of it, we always try to be a little silly on top of it and everything, but we had some super silly. But we like having fun, right, guys?
Yeah,
we like having fun. We enjoy comedy. We enjoy all these things, and so we have a show lined up for you that is just going to be awesome. We have a special guest on for our episode 5.
So special.
Yep.
Tell us about him. By the way, I try to tell my wife that I'm a fun guy all the time,
and she doesn't believe you.
I'm a fun guy.
Well, how long has she been with you?
I think we're going on at least a couple years now.
So I think she's figured it out.
Yeah, why do I have to keep saying it to her?
I know. She should have figured it out by now.
Jesse, tell us about our guest.
All right, so we have on today a one Chris Wineland.
Yeah.
Stand-up comedian. I'll actually just read his bio. It says that Chris Wineland is one of the most in-demand Christian comedians and writers of today.
Dang.
He has brought laughs to millions for over a decade and has written for Emmy-nominated Late Night with Jimmy Fallon. Pursuing his love of late-night comedy, Chris co-created the acclaimed Christian late-night show Next Week with Jeff Durbin.
Okay.
He is currently the host of the online late-night sensation The Monologue Show. Chris Wineland's content has reached over 3 million views and counting. Please welcome Chris Wineland.
Chris!
Yeah. Hey!
How you doing, buddy?
Hey, guys, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Are you nice?
I would like to say I was promised a serious episode, so I'm hoping that's what is supposed to happen.
And before we talk about comedy with you, we want to get your views on the infra-supralapsarian debate.
Oh, okay. All right, wait, I'm out.
Never mind, it's Chris.
Hey, are you nice and cozy down there in Phoenix, AZ, brother?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good over here. Not too bad.
Yeah, that's good. Well, we are at a tropical 28 degrees this morning here in Michigan, and that's a joke, but honestly, that's about as warm as it's been in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah,
I think we're supposed to get to, 51?
Yeah, something like that. It's, what in the world?
What, do you have a call coming in?
I'm sorry, I have a phone call coming in.
We should take it. We should take the call. Take the call on the podcast.
I am not taking no phone calls. So if you're hearing beeps, that's what that is. But we're going to ignore it right now. No, we're gonna not worry about that.
Because it's sketchy on the iPhone. If you don't know how to switch or hang up.
Yeah, no, I don't know what buttons to press on the iPhone. It's all cryptic. Thank you, Apple. Okay, so anyway, we have Chris on today, and it's going to be great. And hopefully we're just going to have a laid-back conversation, ask a few questions, and kind of just talk about comedy to the glory of God today. We've had these different topics, talking about theonomy, talking about the kingdom of God and things of that, and an aspect of that we should be adhering to and really looking to as Christians is all areas of life and bringing the Christian worldview into all those areas. And one of those areas is the arts, is movies, music, television, things like that. And one thing that I have a love for is comedy. I'm not able to do it myself, but I'm able to watch it, and I'm able to enjoy comedy, and I love that. And so I was so blessed by Chris to be able to come on the show with us, and it's just hopefully it's going to be really good.
Yeah, I was surprised to even talk to you, to be honest.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris.
I didn't have anything going on that day. So.
I'm
just kidding.
To blend two things that we love, comedy and law, we have a quick game for you to play. Are you ready?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I'll play a game.
All right, cool. This is called Real Law, Fake Law. And since we have a couple of states, we have Arizona represented here today, we have California represented here today, and we also have Michigan. And so I pulled up some crazy laws from each one of our home states, and then I also wrote a fake law, and we're going to have you try and guess which is the real law and which is the fake law from each state. Are you ready?
This is awesome.
Oh, I'm ready.
Wait, what happens if he gets it wrong?
We kill him.
Okay, well, at least my beard's not getting pulled out this time.
No. Yeah. Nothing that serious, just murder.
Hey, you guys wish that you could kill me because then you'd be able to come to nicer weather.
That's really all it's about.
Yeah.
That's all it's about.
We're just going to fly there just to do that.
Yeah, we're just looking for an excuse to get out of the cold. All right, Chris, we're going to start in your state, Arizona. And so I'm going to read 2 laws. You tell me which is real, which is fake. Are you ready?
Yeah. I'm definitely ready.
First law, no person shall bathe with a donkey other than the 3rd Saturday of the month. Permits for the other days may be obtained by the associate director and are good for the remainder of that calendar year. That's the first law. Okay. Second law, no person shall feed garbage to swine without first obtaining a permit from the associate director. All permits shall be renewed during January of each year.
These are tough.
No, I'm very confident about this one.
Okay.
So it's definitely the donkey is the real one.
Okay.
And the pig is not the real one.
Okay, well, you're one step closer to being murdered in your homeland, my brother, because you got that
What?
totally incorrect. Yes, yeah. In Arizona, it's law that no person shall feed garbage to swine without first obtaining a permit. It's okay to feed garbage to your swine, Chris, but not without a permit.
Okay, but what have I been doing with my donkey then?
Well, you're all good. You're in the clear. So,
yeah.
Hey,
all right.
How do you feel about that law? Do you feel like that's is that a good law or a bad law that you need a permit to feed your swine garbage?
Man, I don't want a permit for nothing. I just want them to let me eat garbage if I want, feed garbage, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You're gonna fit in just fine here. No permits for nothing.
Yeah.
All right, from California, here's your first law. People obtaining animals other than dogs or cats must alert any elderly, 65 plus, neighbors within 30 days of the animals arriving at the residence. Failure to do so will result in a $20 fine for each offense.
What?
Second law. Any person may possess any number of live frogs to use in frog jumping contests, but if such a frog dies or is killed, it must be destroyed as soon as possible and may not be eaten or otherwise used for any purpose.
Okay.
It's California. Those could both be true.
Yep.
Yeah, I know. I was just thinking that. I was like, ooh, you got it tricky. So because it's California, I'm thinking the first one makes a lot of sense, but the second one has to be a law somewhere. I feel like that's a real law, and it's just not in that state. So my guess is going to be the first one.
Well, that's a good analysis, Chris, and you are correct on that one. Good job. Give him a round of applause.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? Let's be honest here. If you have a bunch of frogs in a frog jumping contest and one of them dies and you eat it, you are a sicko. That thing should be destroyed.
That's true. Is that an actual law somewhere?
It is, dude. California law. You cannot eat a frog who has just died in a frog jumping contest. You must destroy it. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
All right, last one, and then we'll move into not this. Michigan has 2 laws on the books. One of them's fake and one of them is real. The first one, a woman is not allowed to cut her own hair without her husband's permission. And the second one, no woman may seduce and corrupt an unmarried boy or else she risks 5 years in prison.
What state is this again?
This is Michigan.
I know Michigan, you know. I've been just trying to think of which one would be the real law. And which one should be the real law. Oh. I'm going to go with the first one's the real law.
Yeah, the woman is not allowed to cut her own hair. Hey, Chris, you batted, what's 2 for 3? That's 750?
Two-thirds.
2/3. You did. Yeah. You did real good. Good job.
Good. Yeah. Good. I'm alive.
There's a law in the book in Michigan that a woman is not allowed to cut her own hair without her husband's permission, and praise God for that.
Wow.
Cool. Thanks for playing along, awesome. Chris. Well, thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you. You guys have a good night. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yep, that's all we need you for. All right. So, let's just get into some questions with you. But, to start, why don't you tell us about yourself? What got you into doing comedy and how'd you get started?
Great question. So I started actually on my the day after my 18th birthday. So that was 10 years ago. My mom always said that I should be a comedian, so she would just constantly say it since I was a kid. And I finally was just annoyed, and I think it was probably around 16 when I said, you know what? Fine. When I'm 18, I'll go to a comedy club just for you, and I'll do stand up once. And so on my 18th birthday, I'd forgotten all about that. And she got me a DVD of Christian comedians that were not funny. There are tons of comedians that are very funny, but this particular bunch and the DVD was genuinely not funny.
Oh, man.
And so the best thing, if you ever want to try to get somebody to do comedy, just have them watch a DVD of comics that are not funny. And then they'll just sit there and go, I could do this. And so that's what I did. I was sitting there and I was like, I could do this. And my mom, she was tricky, and she was like, oh, well, you did say you do stand-up as soon as you're 18. So I said, let's do it. So there was only one. We lived in Niles, Ohio at the time. There was only one comedy club anywhere near us. We drove to it right then and there. I was so fired up. And went by, and there was some lady smoking a cigarette, and I was like, hey, lady. I think that's what I called her. And I was like, when's open mic? And she said, it's tomorrow. And I said, okay, great. So I went home, and I just wrote 5 minutes of material that to this day I will not do any of those jokes because they're not good. And then I went on stage the very next day with, my mom was there as well. And I thought I was just doing it just for that weekend, just as a hobby. But the moment I got up on stage, and it was supposed to be 5 minutes, I was so nervous, it was 2. But the moment I got a laugh from somebody that wasn't my mom, I was hooked.
Oh, wow.
I was like, what is this? And it just became I was obsessed after that.
How cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you've been doing it kind of just pretty much ever since, right?
Yeah. So I've been doing it, for a decade. And my first year, like I said, I was so obsessed that my first year I just started I did 200 shows my first year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. When I say shows, I mean that loosely, guys. I would go because like I said, we only had one comedy club. So Funny Farm would only let me up on Wednesdays, which was open mics because I was new. So I went to Taco Bell's. There was a Taco Bell down the street from me, and I would just wait for somebody eating a chalupa, and I would be like, hey, I'm a comedian. Can I tell you some jokes? And they'd be like, all right. And I would go into 10, 20 minutes there in a Taco Bell, and nobody cared. They just let it happen. And then I would go so many times. I'd be walking down the street if I saw a bar and I heard music in the background, I would just run back there and I'd wait until the band was done playing, and I'd say, listen, can I do 5 minutes? I would do anything. I made sure to try to do stand-up every day that I possibly could. So it was, awesome. We ended up counting. It was 200 the first year.
Wow.
Wow.
Awesome. Taco Bell dates included, though.
Talk about what?
So 200 shows, Taco Bell dates included.
Yes, Taco Bell dates included. Yeah, to this day, sometimes I think I'll put that in my calendar. Sometimes I think I should, just go on a Taco Bell tour.
Yeah, just talk to him and do a promo with him, get a chalupa, get some free jokes.
I should call it Remember My Roots tour, and then it's just me going to Taco Bell.
Go to Taco Bell's. Oh, that's awesome.
I'll say this: if I could go to Taco Bell and get some of that adhesive bean, whatever they put on their tacos, and hear some jokes, I'd be styling.
Yeah, right.
Adhesive. I like that.
So in your bio, it says that you wrote for Late Night with Jimmy Fallon. That's pretty cool. Me and my wife actually, I don't watch Jimmy Fallon, the shows,
okay.
But I like the YouTube clips and stuff like that, and I like the games that he does and all that kind of stuff. It's me and my wife enjoy sitting and watching that. So tell us, what was that like? Where did that start? Did you just start submitting stuff in or something? And
No. So that was one of the craziest things that ever happened to me. So it literally ended. So right after my first year of stand-up, and I'm a big believer in the whole 10,000 hours thing from the book The Outliers. Mm-hmm. So thankfully I had read that the moment, or I learned that the moment I had started stand-up. So I was like, boom, let's hit my 10,000 hours as soon as I can. I think I just hit it yesterday. Who knows? But anyway, so I started the first year. I went crazy in stand-up, and then the second year, people always tell you if you start stand-up that you shouldn't make money from stand-up until after your first year because you just don't know what you're doing. So I only did one show my first year that I made money at, and I bombed so much it was at a church, and it was one of those weird churches where nobody laughs unless the pastor laughs. And the pastor only laughed one time.
Ooh.
That's horrible.
So I was bombing, and it was like right before my 1 year anniversary, like right before I was like, okay, I finished my first year. And it was so bad that afterwards I went up to the guy who was supposed to pay me, and I said, listen, I was terrible. Like, you shouldn't even pay me. And he goes, well, we already wrote the check. I was so embarrassed. I was like, all right, just give me that check, and I left. So then after that, I really was like, okay, if I'm going to make money on this, like, I really got to work hard. So I kept really just crafting it, working on it. And in my second year, I was featuring at a comedy club in Erie, Pennsylvania. And I happened to be opening up for one of the writers of Late Night with Jimmy Fallon at the time. So this is before Jimmy moved over to the Tonight Show. He was writing for Late Night. And what's so crazy about this, all right, guys, I know everyone's reformed, so I'm not getting creepy at all. But I was in New York City with my comedy friend literally like 2 months before that. And we decided to go for a tour in the NBC studios. And so we were walking around, and they showed us Late Night with Jimmy Fallon. And I had never even liked his show because he had just started out. I didn't think it was that good. I've always been a Jay Leno fan, so it's like whatever, just not into it. And so we get there, and the moment we get there, I felt this was the weirdest thing. I'm looking, and I was like, I turned to my buddy, and I go, there's something here. Like, I'm gonna do something with this show somehow. And he was like, all right, whatever. 2 months later, I'm opening up for one of the head writers of the show at the time, one of the writers of the show, and he liked my stuff, and he's like, hey, I really like your stuff. Would you be interested in writing for Late Night with Jimmy Fallon? And I was like, oh, well, heck yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
So I ended up being a fax writer, monologue writer, where I wrote monologue jokes for the show, and it was just it was a blast. It was the first time that gave me like confidence, because I've always been obsessed with late night. That's always been to me some of the most influential shows that exist in our society, and so I've just always loved it, and I never thought that I would be able to be anywhere where it's tangible to me. But now I'm like everything is late night in my life, and it's pretty awesome.
That's cool. That's really cool. Yeah, and what's interesting to me is, the fact that they would, have you write for them and do all that, mainly because when you think of, comedy in today's generation or today's culture, kind of, it's really the comedy that's most popular is like the one that's, for lack of better words, more explicit. You have these comedians that just kind of talk garbage all the time and all that. And some of them can be funny, but in all honesty, when it's just the way that it sounds and the way that they talk and the things that they talk about, it's just like, okay, I'm checking out. And as a Christian, it's like, I'm definitely checking out. Yeah. So with that being the case, and most people think that that's really the only way you can do comedy. What would you say to that stigma? That it's kind of hard to do clean comedy and stuff like that.
Yeah, I've actually had a lot of even dirty comics come up to me and compliment me, and they're like, "Man, I could never do clean." And so that's why I literally, anytime I find somebody that's brand new to comedy and they'll say, "Hey, I just started," or "I'm starting next week," the first thing I say is never do dirty comedy. I said, don't even open up the door for you, because once you do, you're going to think it's impossible to do clean.
Right.
And if you're dirty, not only obviously everything aside, dirty makes less money than clean. The only way you're going to make money dirty is if you end up, on Netflix or Comedy Central. Right. But nowadays, when you do clubs, I prefer churches over clubs, because when you do clubs, you only make like $400 for the whole weekend. You do 5 shows. Do a church and you're well known, you make a lot more on one night.
Okay. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because I didn't know that. I didn't know that you actually end up making more money doing that.
Yeah, and so I do that with the comics. I do that first as a business side, but obviously doing it in the Christian standpoint of saying, well, where do I stand as a follower of Christ? And when I read scriptures like Ephesians, and it says, stay away from coarse jokes and basically perversion and everything like that. And I go, okay, well, I'm a comedian. That's what Ephesians says. I'm a comedian. So where do I stand with that? And there's that conviction where you have to decide and go, okay, well, God created humor, for sure. He created comedy. So because of that, I know that this is a good thing. But just like everything else in the world, the enemy sin really tries to corrupt every good thing. And so I have to just identify that and go, okay, well, I'm going to land on the good thing, which is clean. For me, I think it's easy because I grew up only listening to clean comedy. I didn't even grow up in church. Okay. I didn't get saved until I was 17 on my parents' treadmill. So
same, dude.
True. I wasn't even at church. I was just on a treadmill.
I also got saved on your parents' treadmill.
Yeah. Well, God knew I was going to be a comedian. So he's like, let's get you saved in the weirdest place possible.
That's great.
So
hey, Chris,
okay?
how often do you find yourself, it sounds like, I don't know how much you do clubs compared to churches, but how often do you find yourself you playing the same night that some of these secular comedians will play, and are you mixing it up with them backstage? What is that? Do you have relationships with those guys? How does that work?
Yeah. So that's a really great question. Hey, you just tapped into something I'm passionate about. So, all right, we're going to be talking for the next hour. I apologize.
Oh, take your time.
No. Yeah, so basically the way that works is I try to do clubs as much as I can. I started off in the clubs, like I had said before, and I really didn't want to do churches at all. I didn't like the stigma of Christian comedy. I didn't like being called Christian comedian. I didn't grow up in church, so even to this day, I do churches quite a bit, but I never do like churchy jokes. I don't talk about pews or growing up in church because I didn't grow up in church.
Yeah.
So I just do relatable, observational humor that would be fine in a comedy club that would get a big laugh at the clubs. So I still do clubs. I try to do more than I try to do as many clubs as I can, and that's because I feel like it's an unreached mission field. There are no resources. I'm working on one right now. I should be done pretty soon, but there are no resources that minister the gospel to comedians. There are none. None exist. Nobody's doing it. And so what I started to do when I first started stand-up, my first open mic, actually, the one I had talked about earlier, was me getting up on stage and talking about how I'm a Christian and, just all these things. And I very quickly was not a favorite in the club. And so then I started doing other clubs, and I've realized anytime I would talk about Jesus on stage, people, they would not ask me back. The clubs wouldn't. So I thought, well, you know what? The audience isn't there for a sermon right now. So the best way that I'm going to be able to minister or do any of that is off stage when people ask me, hey, why are you so clean? Because that was the number one question I would get. They would say, why are you so clean? But you're funny just like everybody else, but you're clean. Yeah. And so then it transformed into, okay, audience members would say that sometimes. But then when I do clubs, I'm with the same comedian for a whole weekend. Or same 1 to 2 comedians the whole weekend, and that's when I realized that's my moment to talk to them. And I just try to have lunch, dinner, breakfast with them the whole weekend because comedians are pretty lonely for the most part. Yeah, right. So they're just there, just waiting for 6 o'clock to go to the club, show up, and do some jokes. So I had I was in Chicago, and thankfully my wife was able to come with me. We were doing this awesome comedy club in downtown Chicago, and the comedian, he and I became close friends that weekend because I invited him. I said, hey, come to dinner, come to lunch. We just had him the whole time. And at the end, the last night, he went out and had dessert with us. And my wife and I were just talking to him about, hey, what'd you grow up believing? And he really opened up to us, and then he asked us questions about, he was like, I'm pretty sure you guys are Christian. And he just asked us questions. Yeah, you kind of start to know a little bit. And so we just opened up to him, and it was awesome. And to this day, I still try to call him as often as I can. So it's really just creating those relationships and everything. That's where I've seen the most effective. When I get up on stage and be like, hey, how's the crowd going? You're all sinners. Okay, let's keep talking. That doesn't work out. It doesn't seem to work as well.
Yeah, right. Well, that's really awesome. That kind of actually leads into my next question. So you kind of explained it a little bit already, but in that way, would you view that as kind of how you're doing comedy to glorify God?
Yeah, I would because, people have said this argument all the time, so I don't want to kind of dive into it again, but people always say the whole point of everybody wants the idea of a Christian musician or a Christian comedian, but there's no Christian plumbers in the world. Right. And nobody's like, I'm only going to hire a Christian plumber. Like, no, they just want to make sure that you can do the job right. So the same thing goes as a comedian. It's like, my job is to make you laugh as hard as I possibly can. And the difference is I can also pray for the spirit of joy, whereas a secular comedian cannot. So I can say, all right, hey, I want to bring in joy. That's my edge. That's like my really awesome edge there. But my biggest thing is to do the best I possibly can on stage, so that off stage you want to come and talk to me.
Right.
And once you come and talk to me, I can minister.
A Christian musician or a Christian comic, you're not a Christian comic because you tell Christian jokes. The most Christian thing you could do is be the best comedian possible, right?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, actually, yeah, I don't know if you guys have ever checked, but on on my YouTube, I have a video. It was my first comedy special, and so it's titled "Hilarious Christian Comedian" because my producer Marcus Pittman said, "Hey, if you put that in the title, you're going to get a lot of views." So we hit 100,000 views just recently, which was great. One of the biggest comments you'll read underneath is they'll go, "You're not a Christian comedian at all." And I'm like, yeah, well, my bad. I mean, I don't know. So,
yeah. Well,
so I think that the title honestly is such a distraction. I'll use it, just to kind of speak somebody's lingo and somebody's language. But I mean, the idea is like, I'm a follower of Christ and I'm a comedian, and I don't think I have to choose one or the other in this world.
Right. No, that's awesome, man. Thank you for that. So here's just an aside question to kind of turn left field. What are some of your who are some of your favorite comics?
Yeah, so my favorite comedians.
Yeah.
Basically everybody that's gotten in trouble this year. No, it is like I can't answer the way I used to. I used to be like, oh, Bill Cosby was like my hero, and now I just have to like just stare at people and be like, you know who I'm not.
You know who.
Louis C.K. got in trouble too. Is he on your list or?
Well, he hasn't been on my list, but he is a very talented comedian. Yeah. And so when I saw that, which that's just a whole nother thing. So it's it's just crazy. But pretty much my influence has always been Cosby, Ellen DeGeneres, Louis Anderson, because like I said, I grew up with clean comedians. So I had never, and I don't even know why, but for whatever reason, my parents just always took to clean comics. So, I really grew up watching all those guys, Jeff Foxworthy, and
Sinbad.
Sinbad.
Sinbad was a good clean comic right there. My mom loved that guy.
Yeah, it wasn't until I started doing comedy that I had ever even heard of Richard Pryor or Louis C.K. or any of those guys. Wow. I didn't even know who they were.
Wow. Do you listen to any of the I actually listen to quite a few podcasts from comedians right now. They got their whole it's pretty amazing in the podcast world. There's like a whole crew of comedians, and they all rotate between each other's podcasts, and some of them are language-wise just terrible. We got like the Tiger Belly podcast with Bobby Lee and Rogan and Chris D'Elia, and one of my favorite comics is Theo Von. I think he's hilarious.
Theo's great.
Yeah, he's just got such a unique style. Do you kind of tap into that world at all? Do you listen to those guys? Do you is there anybody like that has a Netflix special right now that's just killing it in your eyes, even if they are secular?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So I love. I mean, right now, I study stand-up, and once again, I feel like it's kind of been a mission field for me, so I definitely want to get to know some of these guys for the hope that when I get to meet them, I'm like, hey, we're on the same page. I think right now, one of the greatest, most talented comedians that exists at this moment is Bill Burr, hands down.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, Bill Burr is good.
Yeah, and he's kind of been on the fringe insofar as he's kind of one of the few guys that's got the guts to speak out against some of the political correctness and all that stuff too, right?
Yeah, he is. He's one of the few guys. And it was kind of frustrating because after Louis C.K. thing happened, and then Louis got back up on stage just on an open mic. He wasn't getting paid. He was just getting up because he's a stand-up comedian. Because when you're a comic, you have to do stand-up. It's inherently inside of you. And so when he got up on stage, and it became this huge thing all over. The media was arguing and being like, he doesn't deserve to do comedy. It's like, no, if you're an artist, you have to do art.
Right.
You can't say, hey, you can't do art because of what your personal life looks like, right?
Right.
So So Bill Burr, was one of the few to stand up because a bunch of comedians started tweeting and being like, I can't believe that he, like he doesn't represent us, blah, blah, blah. He should go leave, forever. And Bill Burr was like, listen, all of you comedians that are saying this, first off, you're wrong. Secondly, you're just saying this because you're a no-name and you're hoping to get popular. Oh, wow. And like, I was like, ooh, Bill Burr, man, he's got it. So yeah, he's one of the few that he won't buckle. Like he won't apologize when something happens, and he doesn't seem to join the side of somebody else if it's not true. So it's pretty cool to see that. And talent-wise, I mean, he's been hustling forever. So it's really cool that the moment he started to get big, you just see this like really polished guy. I mean, one of my favorite specials of his is on Netflix. It's the black and white one, and he does this whole bit about how he read in the newspaper that this guy who had terminal illness, and he jumped out of a helicopter to just end his life. And this whole bit is he tells the story through the perspective of the man who's jumping out. Then he tells the perspective of the helicopter tour guide who's seen the same thing. So he redoes the whole bit again just to give you a different perspective. And it's funny the whole time. And literally I watched that and I just sat there and I was like, I have to make a bit like this like one day in my life. This is a masterpiece. That's
brilliant.
That's awesome. Hey, do you ever find yourself, just because just kind of being plugged into all those podcasts, have you ever played the Comedy Store or been in that world at all?
No, so I've been in the world on more the New York side. I did Gotham Comedy Club, did a bunch of the comedy clubs out there, and then over in LA, I've always teetered back and forth on wanting to go into that world.
It seems dark,
obviously. Oh, it is dark. It's very dark, and that's kind of what has always kind of stopped me. Yeah, is I always get to that point. And then I walk in, and it's just it's very dark. There's but so I've thought about it. I have tons of friends that do it, and as of right now, God's just really been leading me in the late night world, and which has always been like a huge passion of mine, and into the church kind of circuit as well. So. And corporate. So I've kind of just been doing that, but any opportunity that I ever have to walk into a club, I take it. And I've never even been to the Comedy Store. Wow. So I feel like that unvalidates me somehow. But.
Yeah, it does. In fact, this conversation's over. So.
Okay, thank you guys. Have a good night. I appreciate it. Yeah.
So kind of continuing into your late night passion a little bit, that kind of led you to where initially I had seen little bits of you before online and stuff like that, but I really got introduced into your stuff through Apologia and through watching that and doing that kind of stuff. So, and then, like I said in your bio, you helped co-create the Late Night with Jeff Durbin. Kind of talk about that a little bit. How did you guys kind of get connected? What kind of brought you into doing that?
Yeah, so that was such an interesting thing. Again, it's been cool because late night itself I've just been feeling like it's just been presented to me. It's always been a passion, but I've always put it up in some part of my life where I'm like, wow, it's kind of unreachable. It's whatever, And so I have tons of friends that are late night writers on a bunch of different shows. Once again, they're more not necessarily Christian or anything, but they write for shows. And one of them writes for Conan, and he's Brian Kiley is his name, and he's been like helping me out, giving me advice. He's been writing for Conan since they were on Late Night with Conan O'Brien. Mm-hmm. So this guy's like a genius. And so I was sitting there, and I had just done like 2 years touring on the road, just nonstop touring. We were on the road like 355 days out of the year. Wow. I had like 10 days off, and so I was just going, and all of a sudden I had this, the moment I got to slow down a minute, I had this passion again for late night. And I had noticed, like, I've been watching it, and The Daily Show has just been, ever since they switched from Jon Stewart to Trevor Noah, I just haven't really liked it. And I feel like, it just became opinion instead of jokes. Yeah. And instead of trying to find any sort of facts, they just wanted to do opinion. And so I was kind of like a little bit upset about that, but I had this passion. And so I told my wife, who was at the time my fiance, I said, listen, I think we're going to have to move to LA or New York. And because I have all these friends in late night, I think I could get a good connection in. So I started working on a packet. to be able to send in. So I was like, okay, yeah, we're probably going to end up doing Conan or something. So let's go ahead and just prepare to move.
Mm-hmm.
And the same weekend that I decided to sit down and write this packet, my friend Micah Thomas, who's friends with Apologia Studios, he had sent me this post that Apologia put up. And they put up this post on Facebook that said, we're thinking about doing a Christian late night show. And if anybody wants to send in a submission packet, we would love that. And it was like perfect timing.
Wow.
And so he sent it to me, and I was like, yeah, and I had decided to have my home base out here in Arizona, and they happen to be in Arizona. So
Right.
I was like, well, wait a second, maybe I should just try that. So I sent in the packet, and 2 days later, Marcus Pittman messages me, and he goes, "Dude, your packet was amazing. I sent it around. Everybody loved it. We want to meet with you soon." So I think I sent one more thing too, because he wanted to see a different style. So I sent him one more thing, but he loved both. And then we met, and they kind of pitched me the idea of a Christian late night show, which has always been a passion of mine. Because what's crazy is, not to go on too much of a tangent, but this is what's crazy, is that Christians, there's a history of Christians in the entertainment industry, but we as Christians left the entertainment industry.
Right.
So originally, Hollywood was a Christian town. It was 100% Christ-focused. There were all these laws actually involved in this town where they didn't have any alcohol, they didn't have any movies. That was one of the biggest things. They were against the movie industry, and that was Hollywood land. And so originally California said, well, listen, this would be perfect for movies, and they said, no, we voted it down. And so they decided, no, let's vote it down. So then Hollywood land ran out of water, and California said, well, if you just kind of join us, we'll own you, but at least you'll have water. They said, okay. So the moment that they joined, they said, oh, guess what? We're going to do movies in your town. And so they did movies, and instead of seeing the influence that movies have, they decided to get upset and, just kind of leave that whole area. Wow. So then priests ended up being at one time, we didn't have the parental guidance things, for PGs and G. We didn't have that this board coming up with ratings for movies. What we had was basically essentially a 10 commandments, and it was these 10 rules that you were not allowed to you're not allowed to show sex in any way. You're not all these things, and they were the 10 commandments. And we had priests that would read scripts at one time, and if they liked it, they would bless it. If they didn't, then they would say, no, you can't make this movie.
Sounds legit.
Yeah, right? Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
And what happened was, out of nowhere, the priests decided to just stop. They were like, nah, let's just pull out. Maybe they were busy, or they had something else, who knows. And so they just abandoned it, and then that's when we got the rating system that we currently have now. And truthfully, we say that they're a group of parents, but we actually don't know who they are, because they don't reveal their identity.
Yeah.
We got no idea who these guys are. So Christianity has our roots in entertainment, but we abandoned them. And we got to the point where churches would actually banish somebody from their church if they found out they could watch the movie.
Oh, yeah.
So there are real historical things of people, families, church members going to another town just to go see Wizard of Oz.
Wow.
Because they knew that they were going to get in trouble. Wizard of Oz.
That's a really good example of... Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
No. I was just going to say, just imagine... Because nowadays we have Wizard of Oz and DVD usually in most of our houses.
Yeah.
But at the time, we weren't even allowed to even think about it.
That's a really good example of Christians, the kingdom, sort of drawing back from taking dominion and sort of letting the other side control a whole area, take dominion over a whole area, where we just pull back and say, okay, we're gonna wipe our hands clean of this.
Exactly. And so when I heard about the idea of a Christian late night show being greenlit, to say, hey, we're going to do this, I immediately came into that meeting with ideas. And I said, listen, here's the deal. I said, if we do this, the first year we need to expect there's going to be a lot of people that are going to disagree with us.
Yeah.
Because Christian late night doesn't exist.
Yep.
And to do that means you're going to make jokes. And Christians, obviously, unfortunately, there's a group where they just want to pretend like we're something that we're not, And because of that, we can't make any jokes at all. And so if we do, somebody's going to be offended. So that's the biggest thing I pitched, is I said, listen, the first thing is somebody's going to be offended. The second thing is, if we keep going, we're going to open up doors that nobody thought was possible. Like, we're basically going to be able to create the genre of Christian late night.
Yeah.
And so we all sat there at this table and we were like, let's do it. And I said, like, no, I'm dead serious. And so I had all these ideas. And we came in, originally I was just going to, like, I was the head writer, but, like, I brought in all these ideas. And me and Marcus, who's a genius, he and I literally just spent hours. We stayed up for the first few episodes. We stayed up all night long, just the night before we filmed the show. And we just prepared, and I rewrote the script. And at the time, like, I have the title of head writer, but I was the only writer on that show. Wow. So I would do like 40 hours a week just to get the next episode, sometimes 50. I mean, I would like get really no sleep, and I was traveling on the weekends to do stand-up. And so I would go and do the show, and then I'd go to the hotel or the house, wherever I'm staying at, and I would just go back to writing. And the biggest thing was to write in Jeff's voice. So he would send me a bunch of list of, hey, these are the points I want to make during our desk piece. And then I would just write jokes in between and try to like make it in his voice and do all that stuff. And so we did, I think, 25 episodes. And honestly, I'm so proud of him, because I think we did something. Like,
oh, for sure.
I don't know.
I like how you mentioned you had to do it in Jeff's voice. Like, were you imitating Jeff when you were?
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, when I would be in the studio and he was there, I would just watch him. Like, I would just sit there and watch him and go, okay, this is how he is. Mm-hmm. And then, he's not a stand-up comedian. He's a pastor. Mm-hmm. So I had to take that in account too, to say, okay, well, I can't exactly do the setup and punchline the way a stand-up would. Right. So as you'll watch, the first few episodes were more like a late night host who's been doing comedy forever, and it just didn't quite fit him because he's not a comic.
Right, yeah. I did notice that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then you'll notice towards the end that the monologue jokes were mainly dad jokes, things that I knew that he would be proud to say.
It was a lot more smooth.
Yeah.
Yes, a lot more smooth. Yeah. Yes, definitely. And so that's what we did. We went, okay, you know what? Let's not try to be a comic. Let's try to be, a pastor trying to tell a joke type thing. And so I feel like it got better that way.
That's interesting. Did you find yourself doing that same thing for a guy like Fallon? Like, when you sit down to write for Fallon, do you go, okay, I need to write jokes that Fallon can, not necessarily jokes that Chris can deliver, but jokes that Jimmy Fallon can deliver? Were you doing that same thing there? And is that yes. what writers do?
Like, you kind of study the person in a sense?
Yes. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why they look at your sample packet, actually, because they want to make sure that you're writing that whole packet in their voice. So when I started writing for Fallon, they actually sent out, but before I had even started, they had sent just this big list of rules to say, this is just to give you a little bit of guideline. Jimmy Fallon at the time, he would not do any jokes that would be mean or belittle anybody. So there was like some sort of scandal going on with one of the Clintons at the time, and they put out a thing and said, don't even send us anything mean to them. And then he sent, it's like we also had like Tiger Woods, and they were like, don't say anything mean. Like, every time a big scandal came out, he chose not, it doesn't matter, Republican or Democrat, he chose not to say any jokes making fun of them. And then as time has gone on, they've replaced head writers, they've changed the producers, and Stephen Colbert moved up in ratings. So they're like, okay, we need you to abandon everything that you wanted to do, and now your monologue needs to start being mean to the president.
Yeah. So they were kind of avoiding that low hanging fruit for a while.
Yes, yeah, and I thought that it was good. Like, I understood why. That's the harder way to go, but just like clean comedy, it's kind of the harder way to go. So you just gotta stick to your guns, and then after a while, people will start to like you for it, and they'll appreciate you for it.
That's awesome.
Cool, man.
Hey, we want to be respectful of your time, but I do want to ask you 3 quick things, and then I'll let Jesse take you out, if that's okay. Do you have a few more minutes?
Oh, I got like an hour, man. We can just keep going.
All right. Well, we're balling on a budget. I think
I have a list of chores to do, so I'm good. We can take it.
Right on. Hey, I'm interested. What are your joke writing habits like, especially like for stand-up stuff? Are you, when you're home during the day, are you writing jokes every day, or do you write a complete set and then you kind of try to perfect that? How does that work?
Yeah, so over 10 years, it's really changed. I've really seen my comedy and just the way I've done it to kind of evolve a little bit. I don't believe in evolution. I'm just saying that word, but just to throw that out. So the first few years, I was just kind of writing a little bit, and I had noticed the one thing that other comics were saying was that I was cheesy or corny, because I was clean. So you kind of like hit that risk there. So I was like, okay. So then I saw Drew Carey. Actually, I saw an interview of him, and he said, well, you should write 3 jokes a day at least. And I was also I was watching some other comedians, and I thought, well, honestly, I need to like work on my craft more, hit my 10,000 hours. So I started writing 3 jokes a day, and it really morphed into about 10 jokes a day after that. And I did that for a couple years, and I would just I'd put them in a big box every day. And at the end of the month, I would sit down and I would take those jokes and I would put them in a notebook, and then that way I could rewrite the joke. Oh. And so I would rewrite all of these jokes to polish them up, and then I have these stacks and stacks of notebooks in my parents' house somewhere. I haven't even been there in a while, and so they exist somewhere. So that's how I originally started to do it, and I had noticed comics came up to me afterwards, and they're like, dude, I don't know what changed in you, but like you're a much better writer than you used to be. Oh, wow. And so I was like, wow, like that's crazy to be able to have that change and somebody else see it. And so I did that, and then as time went on, and I was still doing, like writing at the time, late night jokes, monologue jokes, and everything like that. So that's a whole different beast. So for stand-up, I was writing. And now what I do is, I think it was about 3 years ago, I was performing with a comedian, Taylor Tomlinson. She has a Netflix special. And her and I were both doing this paid gig up super north in California. And I had met her, and I did stand-up, and then it was her turn. And she killed it, like completely. She was better than I was, and I knew it. And I sat there, and I had a friend that came with me, and I turned to him afterwards, and I was bummed. I was like, she had been doing stand-up less than me, and she killed it. And so I turned to my buddy, and I said, she was better than me, and I know why. And it's because at that point, I used to just be like, as soon as I'd get up on stage, it would just be batters up in my head. Like I would just go, all right, whatever joke I can think of first, like let's just do it. And I didn't really have much of a format. She was so well fueled, like just so polished up, that she knew what joke she was doing in order for the whole hour. Right. And it was by far the best thing. So that night I grabbed my friend. I said, you let me know your favorite jokes. I said, we're going to write the hour right now. And so I wrote down this hour. And then, I moved some things around over the next few shows after that. And then we just went from there. And that's how I'd been doing it. So now we had filmed 2 specials already. The first one is on YouTube. And if you watch it, you're going to be like, man, why does it sound like Chris is bombing? Chris is not bombing. He had a packed show. But the problem is that the audio guy forgot to hit record on the audience mics.
Oh, no.
And and we kept going through this debate on whether or not we should add fake laughter. And everybody said, yes, you should definitely add fake laughter. And I was the only one that said, no, this is my special. Wow. And to this day, I regret it. I'm like, I want to put fake laughter on you. So that's the first special. Then the second one we filmed up in Idaho with Cross Politic. And we're in talks with some streaming services right now, which I'm super excited about. Awesome. So that's the second one. So now I'm working on the third special. And I'm hoping to kind of develop that over the next year. But I've been putting it on my social media. And there's this one bit in particular. It's a trash can bit. And I'm showing the steps, basically, of this trash can bit where I started it at an open mic. And it was terrible. And I barely got a laugh, and then now I'm like probably 5 versions into it, and it's starting to get some pretty good like laughs with a little bit of claps in there, and I'm not even done with it. So basically what I'm doing is I'm taking that joke, and I'm morphing it with my second special right now, and I'm slowly moving out second special jokes with new third special jokes. Very cool. And so that's kind of where I'm at, so that I still have a nice format. But I'm taking my time with this one because I just don't want to I just don't want to look back and be like, man, it wasn't ready. So I just want it to be ready.
Right.
Do you take on a persona when you get on stage, like kind of separate from your real personality? How much of it is like an entertainment, like a character, like you're growing up as an entertainer? How much do you change from the moments you walk up on the stage and before that?
Yeah, my wife says I have a huge different persona. I don't see it, but she says I do. She's like, why are you talking like that?
Who is
I don't know
that?
what you're talking about. But yeah, I think I do because of that. So
yeah, she knows best.
Yeah, I mean it's still me, but when you're up on stage, it's you exaggerate, right? And I think that's what is a big thing. If anybody is interested in doing comedy, to know is that you can't just get up and be you. You have to be you exaggerated because you need that energy. And when you bring in extra energy to get energy in the crowd, you're gonna be a little different.
Yeah, interesting. All right, last question real quick. I'm sorry, Jesse. Jesse's like, dude, we were supposed to go 45 minutes today.
No, hey, you're good. Like I said, I've got so many things on my list and I don't want to do them. So.
Chris, I think, I feel like comedy people agree with me, but people that aren't necessarily in comedy, they don't necessarily think this. I think, and he's got a show on Netflix for a while now, but I think Norm Macdonald is one of the smartest, funniest people on the face of the planet.
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
he calls himself a Christian too. Have you heard that?
Actually, no, I haven't. I have heard him defending the Christian faith, but I did not know he was a Christian.
Yeah, so that confuses me a little bit. But I think, have you watched any of his Netflix show? It's called Norm Macdonald Has a Show.
Yes.
His little blue card throwaway jokes, they're so funny, so bad and so funny. Do you where do you come down on him? I think he's just so different from everybody else.
He is. I mean, he's radically different than Christian or non-Christian comics. Anybody really. I mean, he's an alien that has come down, and it works. I mean, it works for him. I love it. I think what's cool is just to for comedians to be different is exactly what is needed to stand out. And for me, when I first started doing the churches, which was really 3 years ago, I started doing churches on a regular basis, and I started to just do the same thing that all church comics did. So I would just really say the same material that I would do it my own, but I would just okay, if they're going to talk about pews, I'll talk about pews. If they're going to talk about raising your hand in worship, I'll make a joke about that. And I noticed nobody asked me back. And so eventually I just hit this point where I was like, I've got so much in me, and I was kind of studying Lenny Bruce at the time. So, oops. And so anyway, so I was like, you know what? For me, being a Christian is so real, and there's so many real issues that we don't even talk about in church. You can't get up on stage and talk about, literally say porn. But a week ago, I had a men's conference, and I was getting up there, and I was like, what's crazy about men's conferences is that we sometimes don't even say what our actual issue is on stage because we're just trying to pretend to be something else. And I was like, that kind of bothers me. You'll have a guy get up and be like, I had this addiction to this thing on the computer that I couldn't stop staring at. It's like, can we say porn? We know it's porn. It's not Farmville.
Right.
It's not Farmville.
And it got a big laugh. No other Christian comic is going to get up on stage and say porn.
Right.
And I just hit this point, I have jokes about my parents being divorced and just how much that hurt, obviously, and I'll have divorced kids come up and say, dude, I can't believe you said that. So, and, I even have jokes about how I used to be addicted to porn. So it's all of these things, and on the real ones like that, I'll ask the churches usually and be like, is that okay to say? And most of them will tell me no. And I go, I should have asked you. I should have just did it.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that hits me really with comedy is when it's real.
Yeah.
When it's not just something that you're sitting there, no, it's porn, or it's something that's really happened. It's real life stuff. That makes it better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really does. Really does.
Yep. Yeah, because that's the one thing. I mean, we have enough Christian comics that'll make the jokes about pews or about hand raising and stuff like that, which are funny. I mean, some of them are pretty funny when they do that. But it's so refreshing to have somebody who's just going to be real, when they go up there and just talk about real issues and joke and because it's so relatable. I mean, it was when I first watched your special on YouTube there. There were so many jokes that just resonated with me, and it just made it that much better. And knowing that it's you can laugh about these things from a Christian perspective. Like, really. It's not, taboo not to, talk about divorce and things like that. It's like these are real life issues that people are dealing with. And if you can bring joy into that, that's an amazing thing. Right. Or give people peace,
Well, I really appreciate that. And that's kind of where I'm hoping to go with my third special, is kind of just talking about the fact that, hey, if we serve the Creator and we serve Jesus, who literally was not fake in any way, then why are we trying to be fake? Yeah. Right. And so, it's like I'm hoping that this special is me saying a bunch of those taboo things that, well, not really taboo, but, in the Christian bubble, they think, oh, nobody should ever say that on stage. Yeah. And literally, I only have one fart joke. And
that's it.
It's true. I'm not a big fart joke guy, and I'm an adult, so I only have one fart joke. And what's crazy is I told it on stage one time, and the next day I was doing like a weekend there, and the next day it was at church, and the pastor pulls me in, and he goes, "Listen, I know I heard on the Saturday night service you said a fart joke," and he goes, "I don't mind. I'm sure it was great." And he goes, but one lady came up to me, or one lady called me, because he wasn't even there. One lady called me and said how unbelievably offensive it is and totally disturbing it is that you would say the word fart at a church. And he looked at me and he goes, just do me a favor and don't say it. He's like, I don't care. And I was like, all right, okay. I really didn't care.
Don't say it. I don't care, but don't say it.
It's a weird exactly. It's a weird space for a comedian to work in.
Yeah, you don't know what their viewpoints really are. It's touching.
Yeah, well, especially going from church to church, and you don't know some of the belief structures behind them, and so it's like, okay, where am I going to go with this?
It's a whole different world every time.
Right, and to be honest, next week with Jeff Durbin really helped me push myself even more, because I just love the way that Jeff is always, he's going to do things following his convictions regardless of, what like a crowd might say to him or, agree or disagree. And so we started doing jokes where we were like, hey, secular late night shows are going to mock, they're going to mock Christians, they're going to mock conservatives, they're going to do all that stuff. Why don't we start mocking them? And so we did a video, we did a skit. We made a cartoon of Cecil Richards, who at the time was the president of Planned Parenthood, right? And she was retiring, and so we did this video, this little skit about her retiring and what she was going to do after she retired, and basically saying like, oh, I think I'm probably going to go to another country and see if I can help with genocide over there, and just do these things. And so we did it for 2 minutes, and I cannot tell you how many people reached out to me personally and was like, I could not believe you wrote that. And they were like, that was just so sinful. And I was like, no, it wasn't.
No,
sinful.
It wasn't.
No.
I was like, because we're mocking what they're doing. Yeah. And literally, seriously, the most cutthroat joke that we did was how Cecil Richards basically we talked about how she had aborted one of her kids, and she didn't care. Wow. She didn't care, and that's a real thing. She really did it historically. Yeah. Right. And so I was explaining to somebody just how terrible that was, and they were like, okay, but it's still, I don't know if it was Christian. I was like, you're not listening to me.
Yeah, so, yeah. That when you guys do those kind of jokes, that's in a form that's answering a fool according to his folly.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly. Yep. Exactly.
No, that's really cool.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah, which is good. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that we need to be doing as Christians is going to these other views and answering them according to their folly. So that's really good.
Honestly,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say one last. There should be 5 Christian late night shows going on in the world.
Oh yeah.
And there just isn't. So
yeah, there needs to be. Well, hopefully this kind of opens up the doors for more people to be doing that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So that'd be great. So I've also last thing, and then we'll kind of wrap this up. I've been seeing your skits and stuff like that on YouTube and on Facebook and things like that. The most recent one, I don't know if it was the most recent one, but it was one that I had caught. It was the Bird Box parody that you did with Marcus Pittman. Did you write that one and come up with all that, or?
I did, yeah.
That one was hilarious. I won't give away the ending, but go and watch that. It is hilarious.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. If everybody that's listening would go onto my Facebook and subscribe. We try to do skits every week on my Facebook. And now I'm no longer with Next Week with Jeff Durbin.
Mm-hmm.
I have my own late night show called The Monologue Show, and Marcus Pittman is the producer of that show. And so we kind of just expanded it. Instead of calling ourselves a Christian late night show, we are people would put us in the category, I guess you could say, as conservative late night. So which also doesn't exist. So we're still like opening up the window somewhere.
Yep.
And so we did that Bird Box skit. I appreciate that. And I just put out another thing. I do this segment on the show called Wake Up America. It's basically where I lecture a bunch of leftists for not doing what they should be doing. And I after like a few jokes, I'll always say, "Wake up, America," and then I'll do a couple more jokes and say it again.
Sounds like a little
and
Jerry
so we just
Seinfeld
did one
there.
basically because AOC was talking about how, like, well, actually nobody should have kids anymore, and a lot of a lot of socialists have been on that kick, since socialism started. It's like, stop having kids. And so I did this whole bit about like why you should have kids, and how the CDC just came out saying that we're not even making enough kids to replenish America. Like, Americans are not making enough Americans.
Yeah.
And so basically, like, we're dying out, because of it, but they don't realize it. And they're like, have kids. So I just put that out literally like just the other day, and people have been enjoying that. So yeah, it's just a bunch of stuff. If you type in Chris Wineland comedy all throughout Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of it, I'm all in there. And subscribe to my YouTube channel would be great. We're only 300 away from our first 1,000 subscribers.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I definitely encourage everyone to go do this. Guy is funny. His skits are hilarious. His comedy is great. Go check him out on YouTube, on his Facebook page. It's just a really good all around, not Christian comic, but comic who is a Christian, and he's a good guy. So, Chris, we really appreciate you being on, man. This has been awesome. I know we went a little bit longer, and like I said, I know you got stuff that you wanted to do, quote unquote.
Gotta get that honeydew list.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
no problem.
Yep, so we'll let you get to that. Then we're going to go to break here. Chris, why don't you actually just stay on for a minute, and then we'll get taken to a break right now. All right, well, thanks for listening.
All right.
That was fun.
That was really fun.
fantastic.
Such a good conversation.
Cool of him to come on our show too.
Oh, definitely.
Man, I like what he said, man. I would love, and artists are going to do what they do, but just from our standpoint, I love the idea of Christians who are in comedy, attacking other worldviews, essentially.
Yeah.
Answering the fools according to their folly, and and playing the same game. Like we can play that game. We can smash idols through
we're
comedy.
good. We can actually do things good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We do things good.
Yeah, we do things good. I think that was, such a big problem in the Christian world, especially when it comes to like Christian films and stuff like that, because they're not good.
Yeah.
I mean, most Christian films are not good at all, and it's like, guys, we can do so much better.
Yeah, but Left Behind 2 was awesome.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know. I felt really edified after watching that.
I'm sure you did.
But yeah, we do have a tendency in all the arts, like Christians, kind of like we dig ourselves into a little corner, and you don't want to bust out of it. That's why, like, I remember hearing Bonson's son David talking about how much Greg Monson hated Christian music and how he could identify it right away, almost like within the first bar or two. You know that it's Christian music because it's got that typical Christian radio sound, and
it's the same three chords, man.
And it sucks. Same thing with comedy, man. We don't need to be digging ourselves. Just do whatever you do really well, and
do what God has gifted you with, and do it to the utmost, and do it to glorify Him, and it's going to be good.
Yeah, and get in the market and compete with everybody else. We can do it.
Make a good product.
Yeah.
When you make a good product, that's what's going to sell. It's free market.
Yep.
Man, if you do a service and it stinks, and therefore no one's going to want to watch it, but if you do a service and do it to your best and make a good product, then you'll have you'll want to do better and stuff like that. And even in the cases where it doesn't do good, let that be something that pushes you to do better.
Yep.
And to actually make a quality product.
Yep. It's a little bit of a cop out even to like just do quote unquote Christian comedy where you're doing pew jokes and raising the hand in worship jokes and all that. Like there's a spot for that. Some of it's funny or whatever, but I say get into it, man. Mix it up.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's cool, man. I had a lot of fun doing that. Super thankful to Chris for being on the show today. Thank you guys for listening. This has been episode 5 of Reconciled Radio. We will be back next week, and we've got another guest lined up in 2 weeks that I'm really excited about. We'll be getting into, hopefully, God willing, if it all works out, we'll be getting into the topic of not just sort of there's paradigm that can be caught in the modern church of. You hear a lot of people, especially in the Reform camp, going railing against the prosperity gospel. But on the other side of that, we're just as guilty of kind of preaching a poverty gospel. And so hopefully our guest in a couple of weeks will come on, or a couple of weeks, two episodes from now will come on and enlighten us on that, how we can there's a ditch on both sides of the road, not the prosperity gospel, but also we're not called to poverty either. Christians are called to take dominion, grow wealth, leave an inheritance for your kids, take dominion in that sense, and I'm excited about that.
Well, it goes into the same thing we were just talking about here, like actually going and taking dominion and actually wanting to go and do something that's God-honoring. And to do it to your utmost, again, basically because that's the mandate that we were given. God gave us this mandate to go and beautify the world, not just go into our little, Christian ghettos and that be it. It's like, I don't want to extend. No, we have a kingdom that we're working for. It's Christ's kingdom. He's the one who rules and reigns, and we need to be pressing his crown rights into all areas. That's business, that's education, that's art, that's music and everything else, because frankly, what the Christian world has done for the longest time is we've backed out of that. And because of that, and that's the thing, when we were given the dominion mandate, when God gave it to Adam, which is really to all of mankind, even the unbelievers understand that to a certain extent. They don't look at it from that point of view, but they understand it.
And they're beating us in that game.
Yeah, and they're doing
and
they're doing it a lot, and they're making tons of money. But what's so funny about that, too, is real quick, when they make a movie or make something like that, you can tell that there's an aspect of that they can't escape, because what's in all good movies? It's good winning over evil, and they have to tell that story because that's the truest sense of it, And so Christians, we can take that and we can really push forward and push Christ into all those areas and do a good job doing it.
Amen. Amen. So you guys are, the dominion that we're taking right now is on YouTube, it's on Podbean, it's on iTunes. Go like our episodes, go subscribe to our channels there, like us on Facebook, share this episode if you liked it, give us an honest review on iTunes, hit our ratings, do all the things, push all the buttons. We love you guys. Thanks for listening. This has been Reconciled Radio, Episode 5. Deuces.
Peace.
Go cultivate a kingdom culture.